et Adonai Hamivorach Baruch Adonai Hamivorach Hamivorach Leolam Vaed Hamivorach Hamivorach Leolam Vaed. Now that we are ready to pray, we continue on the next page with the Ma'ariv, Rabbi Sam.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidbaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah potech she'arim, u'bitmuna meshane itim, u'machalif et hazmanim, u'mesader et hachokachim b'mishmorotechem barakir kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. U'ma'avir yom u'mevi layla, u'mavdil ben yom u'ben layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El Chai v'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim.
Amen.
This prayer that we recited is a part of the section of the Shema. It is a benediction of the Shema. The Shema is so important it becomes like a center of gravity in the service, and prayers were developed around it. And this one is all about God's love for us. And how did God show God's love for us? But to give us the Torah, because in the Torah we have all the laws and precepts and ways laid out for us of behaving in the world with each other, with ourselves, and with nature, and with our spirituality. And so all that we need for living a good life is in the Torah, by turning it, and reading everything that came out of it from the moment of we received it until now. And adding our own voices to it, yet also. It is a love story that has been our story throughout the ages. And most of all, it is a story of how we have all been created by one God and under one God.
Amen. I'm going to share my screen again. We're going back to Mishkan Tefillah. And we continue on the next page with Ahavat Olam. How appropriate. Eternal love. And it's interesting how the word Ahava surrounds the Shema. That the Shema is about being one, with one God that unites us all from four corners of the earth, like the four corners of the rabbis from around Manhattan, that we all should be united together in love. And that's the moment we put together the four corners of our talit, the tzitzit, which will remind us of the mitzvot, of the good deeds that lead to this unification.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך. You will teach it to your children, ודיברת בם, and speak of it to them. בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת.
Emet means truth. And I think that there's actually some truth to all of the Torah. Even if there are fables in it, I think there's a thread of truth in all of it.
Emet ve'emunah kol zot ve'kayam aleinu, ki hu Adonai Eloheinu. Emet ve'emunah kol zot ve'kayam aleinu, ki hu Adonai Eloheinu. ואין זולתו, אין זולתו, אנחנו ישראל עמו. אבותינו ליד מלכים, הגואלנו מכף כל העריצים. Everyone, אמת אמונה כל זאת, וקיים עלינו, כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו. אמת אמונה כל זאת, וקיים עלינו, כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו. ואין זולתו, אין זולתו, אנחנו ישראל עמו. אבותינו ליד מלכים, הגואלנו מכף כל העריצים. אמת ואמונה כל זאת, ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו הריהם. משה ומרים בני ישראל, לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה.
With great happiness.
ויאמרו כולם.
This is called a Sinai melody, meaning we attribute it to being from Mount Sinai, even if it really is from the 16th century in Europe.
מי כמוך בעינים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש.
Let's try that together from the top.
מי כמוך בעינים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש. תורת תהילות עושה
each of the festivals with a different shade, a different taste, a ta'am. We'll get into that later about the music. Try that with me. So we have a mix there of nusach. Nusach means the flow, the type of melody that we have. That's a mix. I use the Shabbat nusach for the other one, for the Ne'emar. Right after the festival Sinai melody. Shelter of peace, everyone. Amen, everyone. Apore sukat shalom aleinu ve'ala kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. We're going to skip ahead into, excuse me, I need to hide all of you so I can find where I'm going here. We have here a prayer book, so we have to skip, there's a lot of pages. We have to skip to the Tefillah, Festival Tefillah. Where does it say Tefillah? I'm missing liturgical insertions. Festival Tefillah, there we go. We're continuing with the festival Tefillah, and you may rise if you are able. And all we do for the Tefillah, it's called the Tefillah, the standing prayer, the Amidah. And we ask God to just open our lips so that only good words, only praise of God can come from our lips. Open your lips now. Please, God. Open my lips. Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ahel HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Koneh HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Ahavot v'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך חוסן ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע מורי אתה מחלקי חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, צומח עוברים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עבר, מי כמוך אמר גבורו נתן להחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יעללו חסר ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. The Holy God, we include festival prayers in this, the Amidah. During the week we have bakashot, we have requests of God. On Shabbat we don't include these bakashot, we don't include any of the requests because we don't want to ask God to work on Shabbat on our behalf. But we have some beautiful nusach, which I mentioned earlier, that I'm going to include during the Amidah, that this nusach, these melodies, are specific to the three festivals. They unite these three shalosh regalim, the three-legged festivals, the three legs that we use. Three times we travel by foot, by leg, okay, to the temple. And we bring our first fruits, in this case, to the temple. אתה בחרתנו מכל העמים, אהבת אותנו ורצית בנו, ורוממנו מכל הנשונות, וקידשתנו במצוותיך, וקרבתנו מלכנו לעבודתך, ושמך הגדול והקדוש עלינו קראת. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה, מועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון, את יום חג השבועות הזה, זמן מתן תורתנו, מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. Give me an amen. Those three notes remind us of the three festivals. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, יעלה ויבוא, ויזכר זיכרוננו וזיכרון כל עמך בית ישראל לפניך, לטובה ולחן ולחסד ולרחמים ולחיים ושלום, ביום חג השבועות הזה. זוכרנו אדוני אלוהינו, בוא לטובה. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. ופקדנו ובוא לברכה.
Amen.
והושיענו ובוא לחיים.
Amen.
ועשיינו אדוני אלוהינו את ברכת מועדיך לחיים ולשלום, לשמחה ולששון, כאשר רצית ואמרת לבורכנו, אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך, שבענו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך. We continue silently through the Amidah until we reach a prayer for peace, which we need desperately these days. There are also some beautiful readings on the left side of the page. How beautiful and pleasant it is when one hears their song. It's very good to pray among them. That speaks to me. Prayer for Thanksgiving. Modim anachnu lach.
Modim anachnu lach. Baruch atah Adonai, atol shimcha ulechana'eh lehodot.
Amen.
Amen.
Birkat Shalom. Should we sing Shalom Rab? I think we should. Unless you have a request, Rabbi.
I think that what we will do, that's so beautiful, this was so beautiful, is
Move
ask
along.
God to take all of our prayers and uplift our prayers as we move to the conclusion of the service
Thank
with
you.
Aleinu.
All right, we're going to continue together for the Aleinu, which I'm going to find. Aleinu and Kaddish, here we go.
עלינו לשמר לנו לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמודה. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש
Our thoughts now turn to those who have departed from this earth. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. If you are saying Kaddish for someone and you'd like to stand up now, share their names in your heart, please do so. We all stand and join you for the mourners Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divrach yirutei ve'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kari v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shemei Rabbah Morach Le'olam Olmei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shemei Dekudesha Barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, u'yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen.
Now I'm going to conclude with a song that I would have concluded the Amidah with, just to save a little time, because we have some teaching to do now. This is Rabbi
beautiful. Chag Sameach.
Thank you,
So
Rabbi.
beautiful.
Thank you. I know that's your favorite.
My favorite. It's so beautiful. So beautiful.
It's
Thank
her,
you
it's
so
her
much.
favorite because I wrote it. I think that's the reason why.
100%. Your music is my favorite for sure, and that's one of my very favorites of your music. So it's just
Okay, great. So
So
are
now
you?
we're gonna.
Okay.
Sorry, Cantor Dan.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sure.
So now we're going to continue,
Awkward.
but I can see we kind of ran a little over. So I'm wondering. I want to ask Cantor Dan, how do you feel about doing a couple of the songs now, and then the rest of the songs at the end, so we stay more or less on the same? Does that work?
Yeah, let's do that. I like that a lot. Okay, so okay, so we're each presenting a little program. We're supposed to be 15 minutes long, and I went about 10 minutes longer than I should have with the service. So apologies to the rabbis, apologies to all the other people, to Joe, everybody, for going a little late. But we get carried away with prayer, and especially when we're supposed to be joyous, we elongate the joy. Marbim b'simcha, okay? And so just like we extend the month of Adar, we're going to extend our service a little bit. So, Manishtana. So I decided to do basically, I had counted out 7, and it ended up being more songs than 7 that I wrote that could apply to the 7 weeks of the Shavuot, which is what this holiday is. This is the culmination of 7 weeks. This is really more than a month of a Chag, and I still see Rabbi Shira has her Omer counting in the background. So you can imagine us in the field singing these songs together. But right now we're gonna do it with a virtual background. And thank you, Rabbi Shira, for offering us that imaginative background. And we're sitting in a field together singing some songs. It's lovely. So Manish Tana is one of the first songs I wanted to feature. This is from a book that I wrote called, and I was going to bring the book, but it's okay. You guys know about it already. I've presented it here before. I published a book last year, just before the pandemic, and it came out right before the pandemic. It's called Tapestry of Prayer, and it has gorgeous tapestries in it by Lori Wohl, who's a congregant at Stephen Wise, and she made her artwork inspired by the liturgy, but also inspired by the melodies that I've written for our worship at Stephen Wise. And it was an honor to collaborate with her on this book. Then, so it's published with, oh, there it is. Joe has it. Joe's got a hard copy. Thank you. And I know there are other people who have it. And that front thing is hanging in my my living room. That piece right there. These are tapestries. It's actually called unweavings, is a technical term. Anyway, enough self-promotion. Yeah, thank you. No, enough self-promotion. Thank you. So that's published and online and available for anyone through Amazon. You can also download it as a Kindle book, but not many people use sheet music as Kindles. But anyway, you can also order it on demand there. So they print on demand, so it saves paper for the world, and I like that. So this is called Manish Tana. This is the first song of 7 or more if we get to it. So that melody is what I had in my head when I wrote this, and it's got a hook. So Manish Tana usually goes straight through. It's through composed. It doesn't repeat. Okay. So but they wanted a hook. Okay. Friends of mine requested this, so they said, "Can you write a Manish Tana that doesn't just in a major key with a hook?" So I did it. Also with English translation, and it goes like this. Manishtanah halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Manishtanah halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Try it with me. Manishtanah halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Manishtanah halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Shebechol halelot anu matzah halayla hazeh kulo matzah. Sing it with me, kids, now. It's Manishtanah halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Manishtanah halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Every other night
of breads and leavened breads, but on this night, only matzah. Sing it with me now. Manishtana laila hazeh, mikol halelot. Manishtana laila hazeh, mikol halelot. So that's a little taste of that. And then the next song that I have, since going after a Passover, and since these are more kid songs, I've written a lot of kid songs. That's another book that I wrote that I don't think anybody has printed off, but you can order it on demand also on Amazon. That is called Alphabet Bop, and that has all my kids songs in it. So I separated them out. This is from that book, and I actually think I also included it in the Tapestry of Prayer. Vizot HaTorah. Okay, this is appropriate for Shavuot. Vizot HaTorah. This is a call and response. So even on Zoom, we can go back and forth. So if I go, Vizot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Pi Adonai v'yad Moshe, v'zot HaTorah asher sam 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 Moshe, לפני בני ישראל, לפני בני ישראל, על פי אדוני ביד משה, על פי אדוני ביד משה, וזאת התורה אשר שם משה, וזאת התורה אשר שם משה. תורה, תורה, it's our history. Torah, Torah, it's made for you and me. Torah, Torah, it's our history. Torah, Torah, it's made for you and me. And I teach all the things that we do with the Torah, all the roles in the synagogue that we do with the Torah, they all rhyme. We bless the Torah, that's Aliyah. Bless the Torah, that's Aliyah. We read from the Torah, that's Kriya. We read from the Torah, that's Kriya. We lift up the Torah, that's Hagba. We lift up the Torah, that's Hagba. We dance with the Torah, that's Hakafah. We dance with the Torah, that's Hakafah. Torah, Torah, it's our history. Torah, Torah, it's made for you and me. Torah, Torah, it's our history. Torah, Torah, it's made for you and me. There's more verses, but I'm going to cut it short so we can get along with the program.
Okay. So I'm in. Thank you. That was really, really so uplifting, and can't wait to hear more at the end.
Just a taste. A
ta'am. A ta'am, a sweet taste of Torah.
That's right. That's the way musically it's known as a taste. It's a flavor. It's not a sound. It's a flavor. You put it on the lips of children with the sweetness of honey.
Mm. And we're going to continue now with Rabbi Ami Hirsch.
Chag Sameach, everyone. I hope everyone is good. We think this is the first and the last time that we're going to be celebrating the festivals online. So if you like it, enjoy it, because hopefully the pandemic is clearing, and we'll, from now on, we'll be in the sanctuary. Of course, we'll continue to be streaming the services, but plan on coming back. If you're fully vaccinated, plan on coming back. We're still taking quite significant health and safety precautions. But now we'll study a little bit for Shavuot. You know, it's always people always ask. Shavuot is kind of like this forgotten child of the festival calendar in Judaism. And I've had numerous people ask me today, well, what exactly is Shavuot? What is Shavuot? it is a major festival, not only in terms of the tradition, but also what it symbolizes. So, of course, it was one of the pilgrimage festivals. It was connected to the harvest time. It was an agricultural festival. As the rabbinic tradition developed, the rabbis emphasized Shavuot being the traditional time that the Torah was given to the Israelites on Mount Sinai. So there was during the rabbinic period, of course, when the Jews were distanced from the land, this took prominence and precedence that the Shavuot is Zman Matan Toraten, the time that the Torah was granted. And that's really imperative because it's connected to the whole concept of freedom. It is the reason we count down the days, 49 days from Passover to Shavuot. In a sense, Passover and Shavuot are linked. They are an extension of the same holiday. Passover without Shavuot doesn't mean anything because Shavuot Passover does not simply mean, freedom does not simply mean do whatever you want. Freedom means responsibility, willingly accepted under the law, which is what Shavuot symbolizes. So to simply observe Passover, to simply have the freedom message without the Shavuot message, without the law, responsibility, is not freedom, certainly according to Jewish understanding. And to follow expectations without free will is also not freedom. So these two concepts this concept of freedom is directly linked through the counting down of the 49 days between Passover and Shavuot. And so Shavuot is really, from many perspectives, the heart of the matter. It's about Torah. And Torah is what sustains the Jewish people. So I was actually tasked by Rabbi Natov to spend a moment on this concept of Na'aseh v'nishma, which is one of the ways that the Israelites are portrayed as responding to the granting of the Torah. Na'aseh v'nishma, which means we will do and we will listen, which became the focal point of a whole rabbinic tradition that went out of its way to emphasize that Judaism is a religion of deeds, and doing the deed is important, and it is in Judaism. So much so that there's a grand debate in the rabbinic tradition on what's more important, the study or deeds, and different rabbis believe different things. But even those who believe that study is more important, they say that study is more important because it leads to deeds. So the focus is all about deeds. It's why we have 630 mitzvahs, commandments, and so on. But the truth of the matter is, of course, like everything, it's not all about deeds because we cannot sustain the deeds. We can't sustain the observance. We can't impose on ourselves righteous acts unless we at some point come to believe them. Now, the theory of Judaism is by doing the mitzvahs, by doing it over and over and over, you come to understand why you do it. And that is enough to sustain you through a lifetime of doing mitzvahs, of doing deeds. But we do know that, of course, it is important to be convinced that what you're doing needs to be done. Otherwise, in particular in postmodern 21st century America, we won't be able to sustain the discipline of doing the deed. And this concept of Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. In other words, the order is first we do, then we understand, is only one of the three places in this whole passage of the granting of the Torah where that phrase was, at least part of that phrase was used. The first time is in Exodus chapter 19. I don't have it on the screen, but you can look it up if you want. The text says, Vayasem lifnehem et kol hadvarim ha'ele, and Moses put before the Israelites all of the things that God had just said. Vaya'anu kol ha'am yachdav, and all of the people responded, answering, saying, Kol asher diber Adonai na'aseh. Everything that God spoke to us, we will do. So it doesn't say na'aseh v'nishma. It doesn't say we will listen and we will do. It just says we will do. Everything that God placed before us, we will do. The second time is in Exodus chapter 24, verse 3, where the text says, Vayavo Moshe v'yisaper la'am et kol divrei Adonai, and Moses came and told the Israelites all that God had said. Vaya'an kol ha'am, and all of the nation responded and said, Kol hadvarim ha'ele, kol hadvarim asher diber Adonai na'aseh. All these things that God spoke, na'aseh, we will do. So in both of the two initial cases, the text essentially says the same. We will do. Only in the third instance, in Exodus 24, verse 7, does it add the word na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. I'll just read it to you. Vayikach et sefer habrit. Moses took the book of the covenant, Vayikra be'oznei ha'am, and he read it before the people. And they said, Kol asher diber Adonai, again, the same formula. Everything that God spoke, na'aseh, we will do, v'nishma, and we will listen. And so the rabbis felt that the additional word here, na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen, is sort of a corrective to the first two times where the text says only na'aseh, we will do. And it seems to minimize, if not entirely ignore, the idea of assuming responsibility, free will, because simply to act without the necessary free will is to act like a robot. And so the rabbinic tradition felt that it was important to balance this concept of na'aseh v'nishma, we will listen and we will do, as part of an integrated whole. And it was there was a certain discomfort in the way that the Exodus passages describe the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, but because it was essentially described as we will do, we will do, we will do. And that's what slaves do. That's what people who don't have free will do. They just simply do without embracing through free will, the responsibility of doing it, coming to the conclusion on why it's important. So the rabbis added this one passage, which is one of my favorite passages in all of the rabbinic tradition. I'll read it to you. It's in the Talmud. Those of you who want to look it up, it's in Tractate Shabbat, page 88a. The rabbis felt, there was too much coercion, or at least there could be understood to be too much coercion in that original granting of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And if there's coercion, there's no free will. And the coercion is symbolized by this word na'aseh, 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 we will do, we will do, we will do. And so the rabbis are troubled by that. And they have this following passage, which is great. They quote the specific verse from Exodus 19, verse 17, V'yityatzu betachtit har, and the people literally stood under the mountain. That's the literal translation of the Hebrew, batachtit har. They literally stood under the mountain. And that gave rise to this image that the rabbis in the Talmud convey. This teaches, they say, that the Holy One, blessed be He, overturned the mountain upon them like an inverted cast and said to them, if you accept the Torah, it's well. If not, this is the place of your burial. In other words, the rabbis take the literal meaning of the word batachtit har, they stood under the mountain, and converted it into a real live imagery where they said God lifted up Mount Sinai, overturned it on the Israelites below, and said to them, do you want to accept the Torah or not? It's your choice. If you do, great. If you don't, I'm dropping the mountain on you, which of course is no choice at all. And so the rabbis say this is what was actually happening there. One of the rabbis observed this furnishes a strong protest against the Torah. In other words, what this rabbi was suggesting is, if God overturned the mountain and basically coerced the Israelites into accepting the Torah, then it's not a binding agreement because the Israelites didn't enter into the agreement with their own free will. They were coerced, and coercive agreements are not agreements at all. They're not binding. They're not even binding in modern legislation, let alone in biblical legislation. So the rabbi says this furnishes a strong protest against the Torah. Why do you say that God threatened them? So the rabbi responded, his debating colleague responded, yes, even so, it does furnish a strong contention against the Torah, but even so, they, the Jews, accepted it in the days of Ahasuerus. And they bring a proof text from the Megillah of Esther. In other words, yes, it was a coercive arrangement at first. And that's because these were a bunch of slaves. They couldn't do anything on their own. God was God. God did all the lifting. The all-powerful driving force was God in the Exodus. And God's trusty servant Moses, who was the all-powerful, unchallenged leader who was driving them forward. But because of that, this had to be corrected in some way, according to the rabbinic tradition. And it was corrected in the time of Esther and Ahasuerus, where the Jews renewed their willingness to enter into this covenant. And I find it to be very poignant and very meaningful that the rabbis selected, of all of the eras they could have selected when the Jews renewed the covenant, and they did it of their own free will, that the rabbis pinpointed the time of Esther, because in the Megillah of Esther, God isn't even mentioned at all. Here in the book of Exodus, God is doing everything. The people are essentially responding to whatever God is doing. But in the time of Esther, God isn't even mentioned. All of this is coming from the Jews themselves. And that's why I think the rabbis selected this era as the time when they said the Jews renewed this covenant. And this time they did it in a setting where God wasn't even mentioned at all. In other words, where the Israelites themselves, the Jews themselves, were the vehicle of the redemption, and therefore could enter into an arrangement with God in accordance with their own free will. So to conclude, this is a renewal of the covenant that all of us in all of our times need to do year after year, that we take it upon ourselves in accordance with our own free will, because we have been persuaded that we want to do this, to do the deeds of Judaism and to assume the responsibilities of the covenant between God and the Jewish people. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Beautiful. Yasher koach. I always love learning from you, Rabbi Hirsch.
Thank you, Rabbi Natov. And you know it's mutual, and go for it.
So I thought I would talk tonight about some of the metaphors we have for Torah, and how these can be, understood in really understanding our relationship with Torah as it affects our physical well-being, our intellectual growth, and our spiritual well-being. And so I chose three. There's lots of different metaphors for Torah. I'm sure you've heard many of them, but I chose a few for tonight that really gave us insight into these three areas: body, intellect, and spirit. And so first, I'm going to look at one of the most well-known and famous metaphors for Torah, and that is the Torah is like a tree of life. Torah is like a tree of life. And we see that throughout Our text, Torah, is compared to many different kinds of trees, right? So tree of life, we can almost intuit that what is that going to be about? It's really about the longevity of the message, of the covenant unfolding from generation to generation and being passed down. Just as Sandra Singer was saying during her service, the Shinantam, we repeat it, we teach it to our children, we teach the laws of Torah to our children over and over again, right? But what else does the Torah being like a tree help us to, what kind of other kind of metaphors are used that help give us insight into the meaningfulness of Torah in our lives? Here's one from the Talmud. Rabbi Chia said that Rabbi Yochanan said, what is always important that people are always acknowledging each other and saying, you know, who this idea came from. That ideas are never like in a silo. We all get ideas from lots of other people, and we like to show the line from one to one. And that's about longevity as well, and teaching from one to the other. Built right into how we talk about our own thoughts and arguments in the Talmud. So again, Rabbi Chia said that Rabbi Yochanan said, what is the meaning of the verse where it is written, he who guards the fig will eat of its fruit, in Proverbs? And then he goes on to compare the words of Torah that are like a fig tree. That's one kind of tree that the words of Torah can be compared to. Just as the fig tree, the whole time a person tends to it, bears fruit. The whole time a person studies the words of Torah, the more pleasure he brings out from them. So if we think about it, Torah as the tree of life, one aspect is this idea of fruit, of it bearing fruit. And what is the fruit but the most pleasurable part of a tree? It gives us sustenance, it's sweet, it gives us pleasure, and it is the result of care and love and patience and time. And so this comparison is that if we tend to our studies with patience and dedication and repetition and love, and put into it all of our efforts and energies, that we too will, just like getting a fruit from a tree, that we will find that we have gems from it, that we have deliciousness from it, that really imbues our whole lives with a kind of a joy and a discovery. You know, it's a special, sweet discovery. Then we think about the body of the tree, the wood, and we'll look at this also from the Talmud. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, "Why are Torah matters likened to a tree? As it is stated, it is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it," from Proverbs. And that's their proof text. And then they speak about, they look at this text, the tree of life to them that hold fast to it, and they look at the different classes of people, different groups of people that are holding fast to it, and they determine that these are two different groups. They're like kind of new students who are kind of new to studying Torah and don't have all the answers and haven't done a lot of digging yet, and then they're the great masters who have spent their whole lives learning. And what they determine that actually that it is the students that teach the masters the most that they can possibly learn. And here's the way they get to that. This verse comes to tell you that just as a small piece of wood can ignite a large piece, so too beginners of Torah scholar can sharpen great Torah scholars and enable them to advance their studies. And this is what Rabbi Hanina said, "I have learned much more from my teachers and even more from my friends, but from my students, I have learned more than all of them," because the students ask the questions that the teachers have stopped asking, all of the little questions that sharpen the intellect. So they look at the body of the tree as being representative of the wood, which is really the community and all of us and all of wherever we are. We at the roots, are we some branches coming out, beginners, scholars, or well into our way. Okay. So second, I want to look at Torah as a metaphor. The metaphor of Torah is it's like water. Torah is like water. And just a couple of places where this is said, we see in the Midrash, for example, it's written, the Torah is deeper than the sea. The Torah is like water coming drop by drop and becoming a great river. So it's this idea of little bit by bit and becoming something great. And so I want to take that image and look at a writing from Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is about it's a story about Rabbi Akiva. Now, if you know, Rabbi Akiva was known as one of the very greatest Jewish scholars of all time, and he did not, as the story goes, he did not start studying until he was 40 years old. Okay, so for us in modern times, maybe that would be, I don't know, 60, 80, we can start studying and become great Torah scholars. Never too late. And it said here that Rabbi Akiva had still not learned anything when he was 40 years old. And one time he was standing at the mouth of a well, and he asked, who hollowed out this rock to make this well? And he was answered, it was the water naturally that constantly fell on it, hollowed it out. And then they quoted a proof text from the book of Job that says, water wears away stone. Okay. And as it was, this was what influenced Rabbi Akiva to study Torah. He said, just as the soft water shaped the hard stone, words of Torah, which are as hard as iron, all the more so they will shape my heart, which is but flesh and blood. And he went on to study Torah from the water. And maybe it's from this story, I'm not sure, why, in Musar, there's a beautiful writing in Musar literature about Torah being like water, falling from the most haughty, like people who kind of have a puffed up sense of themselves, that water is just going to kind of, go right down from them, but landing on those who are humble in a sense of not puffed up with having too strong an ego, but also not weak enough that they don't feel deserving, just right, so that we see the world as it is. We're not distorting it by being too low on ourselves, and not too arrogant. And it's from that posture that the water comes and lands. So there's an idea of Torah is like water landing with those who are humble, who can then who are then able to take it in. And then of course there's a sense of water quenching. If you look at these images, the idea of water here, it's an element, we can't live without it. Another one coming up, this is our last one for the evening, and 2 minutes, 15 minutes go by very quickly, but this is a goodie, so we'll go with it. The last metaphor I'm going to share with you is that of the Torah being white fire inscribed with black fire, just different fires merged together. So again, another element, very powerful. And what's this one about? This one is really about spiritual uplift. And it comes from also the Talmud, and I'll tell you where this comes from. Rabbi Simeon ben Lakish said, the scroll which God gave was of white fire, and its writing of black. It was itself fire, and it was hewn out of fire, completely formed of fire, and given in fire. As it says, and here's the proof text from Deuteronomy, at God's right hand was a fiery law unto them. So they're taking that quote, fiery law, and taking it literally as looking at this fire, this Torah as being constructed right out of fire. Or maybe not literally, maybe we can say even the fiery law was representative of a metaphor. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Well, in a nutshell, the beauty of this idea is that the white fire is really the voice, the call that summoned Moses to enter the tent. It was the divine call that is unending, that the idea that revelation is from generation to generation, that the covenant is unending, and that we too stand at Sinai. So the call is still out there for us. White fire is our spiritual connection. White fire is the voice of God calling us. And that, upon that, is written the black letters, fixed stories of Torah. So there's this idea that there's this fixed history, stories, and law that we inherit, but the white fire is still open and unending and has room for us and what we add to Torah with our lives. And so with that, wow, I'm running right on time. I think I believe next in the program, can one of my colleagues help me out? I believe it's Rabbi Shira Gluck next.
Yes,
Is that correct? It is. Welcome, Rabbi Shira Gluck.
Thank you for that beautiful teaching, Rabbi Sam. I love that. Well, okay, friends, I just have to say it's so great to see your faces. So if anyone hasn't turned their camera on yet and is waiting for their moment, I invite you to now, if you're comfortable, because it makes me so happy. So friends, we've gotten some attention for the barley field. Tonight's our last night for the barley field. I'm sad, I'm gonna miss it. If you want one more taste of it, join me tomorrow morning with Cantor Joe for Shacharit. So yes, the origins of Shavuot are as an agricultural festival, celebrating the grain harvest and the offering of the first fruits of the season. It's also when we celebrate the giving of the Torah, because tonight is the 16th of Sivan, which is the day when Moses ascended Mount Sinai and received Torah for Israel. So for this reason, we call Shavuot Zman Matan Toratenu, the season of the giving of our Torah. And even though this is an epithet, it would seem to be really a more substantive name for the holiday than the word Shavuot, which means weeks. It's the plural of the word Shavua. But here's where it starts to get interesting. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Yes? We can see it? Okay, good. I always check. So the root of the word Shavuot is Shin Bet Ayin, which means 7. So naturally, the 7-day week derives from this root. That's not so interesting, is it? We'll come back to the number 7 shortly, but the root Sheva, Shin Bet Ayin, is also the root of the word oath or vow. So I'm wondering if that word vow evokes any particular imagery for anyone here. Yes? No? Yes, I'm seeing nods. Well, it did for our ancestors too. Our tradition imagines that Shavuot is much more than a harvest festival. It's actually the celebration of the symbolic marriage between God and Israel. So in the Midrash, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, let's see if we can see it. There it is. In this Midrash, Rabbi Chanina, who Rabbi Sam just mentioned, says, and we won't read the entire thing, but he says, on the 3rd month, Sivan, that's where we are now, the day is twice as long as the night, and Israel slept 2 hours into the day. Moses went into the camp of Israel and roused Israel from their sleep. He said, get up from your sleep. The groom has already arrived and is asking for the bride and is waiting to bring her into the chuppah to give you the Torah. The hour has come and Moses brought the people out, and the Holy One has come to greet the people like a groom who comes out to greet the bride, just like we do on Friday evening at Lecha Dodi. As it says, and this is the verse Rabbi Hirsch was discussing, Vayotze Moshe et ha'am likrat ha'Elohim min ha'machaneh vayityatzvu b'tachtit ha'har. And Moses brought the people toward God, and they stood under the mountain. And the groom goes forth toward the bride to give them the Torah, as it is written, O God, as you came forth before your people. Okay, so we have this midrash, which is like late antiquity, that already has this idea of Shavuot as a wedding. But what's the connection between the wedding of God and Israel and the revelation of Torah? Well, I would suggest that the Torah itself functions as a ketubah, the matrimonial contract. And so if we look at it through that lens, the 10 Commandments, which we recite publicly on Shavuot, starts to look a lot like wedding vows. So here we have just the very beginning. Daber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'ele lemor. God spoke all of these words, saying, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I, the eternal your God, asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mi-beit avadim. I brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. That's my vow to you. And your vow to me will be, Lo yiyeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. You shall have no other God besides me. We won't have time to get into all of the commandments, but this just gives us a little taste. Adonai brought us, God's cherished people, out of slavery as a sign of love for us. And as a sign of our love for God, we promise to have no other God besides Adonai. And so Rabbi Hirsch mentioned the Exodus and the connection between Exodus with Pesach and Shavuot. So if Shavuot is our marriage day, the Exodus is our day of betrothal. On the holiday, this holiday, when we celebrate the Torah, we sing the verse that Cantor Dan played for us at the beginning, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Torah, 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 Morasha kihilat Yaakov. Right, so this is a pretty straightforward verse. Moses charged us with Torah as the heritage of the congregation of Jacob. That's us. Well, the rabbis see a hidden meaning in this verse. And in Sifrei Devarim, which is a midrash on the book of Deuteronomy, they say, Al tikri morasha, ella me'orasa. Don't read it as morasha, as inheritance, but as me'orasa, as betrothed. Shehatorah me'orasahi leYisrael. For Torah is betrothed to Israel. Okay, I promised we'd get back to the number 7. It is traditional for the 7 days before a wedding to be a period of purification. So we come back to that word Shavuot. Let's go back to it. And to the root Sheva as the number 7. So the mystics of the Zohar observed the period of the counting of the Omer, those 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot, as, you guessed it, more than an agricultural observance. They took those 7 weeks to be the equivalent of the 7 days. The 7 weeks are the period of Israel's purification from the Erusin of the Exodus, the betrothal at the time of the Exodus, to the Nisuin, to the marriage that takes place tonight on Shavuot. And so the name Shavuot for this holiday is actually true to both meanings of Sheva, the 7 weeks, culminating in the Shavuot, the vows of marriage that are embodied in our 10 Commandments. So, how do we celebrate this aspect of our holiday? Well, one very cool thing that I chanced upon, because I am hopelessly Ashkenazi, I haven't encountered this personally, is that in Sephardic communities, it's custom to read a mystical ketubah, a wedding contract between God and Israel that is always read aloud in communities. And here is one example of such a manuscript. Apparently, this is a rare example from the 17th or 18th century Italy, and it's in the collection of the Jewish Museum. So I don't know if it's on view, but if anyone goes and sees it, let me know. But leaving aside that, the most significant way that we can celebrate this mystical marriage is the study of Torah itself. And that is the tikkun that we're engaging in right now. So we go to the Zohar, the quintessential book of Kabbalah, of our mystical tradition, one of our mystical traditions. And we have Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the hero of the Zohar. And it says, Rabbi Shimon was sitting and studying the Torah on the night when the bride unites with her groom. So I have some parentheticals here. Let's explain. The bride, Malchut, is essentially Israel. And the groom, Zeir Anpin, is another way to refer to God. So exactly what we've already learned. All of the friends present that night on the eve of Shavuot must stand together with the bridegroom under the chuppah and be with him this whole night, accompanying him and rejoicing with him in the tikkunim, the studying, the repair of the bride. In other words, the study of first Torah, then the Nevi'im, then the Ketuvim. These are the three sections of our Tanakh. And finally, the mystical wisdom, because these tikkunim are the bride's adornments. And the bride adorns herself with this learning and rejoices with them, us, the whole night. And on the next day, on the holiday of Shavuot, she only comes to the chuppah together with them, meaning those who adorn ourselves with Torah. And as she approaches the chuppah, the Creator, the Holy Blessed One, asks about them, us, blesses and adorns us with these adornments, and happy are those who merit it. And so we, the people of Israel, celebrate Shavuot just like Rabbi Shimon and his friends, adorning ourselves with Torah, like a bride about to meet her groom, God who chose us to be Am Skula, God's beloved people.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Gluck. We are going to continue with Rabbi Rena Rifkin.
Chag Sameach, everybody. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sam, Rabbi Gluck, Rabbi Hirsch, Cantor Singer, Joe, our student cantor. It's so nice to be with everyone. And, as Rabbi Shara just finished, she said we should adorn ourselves with Torah. Well, if we're going to study and be together on Shavuot, then actually we should study some actual Torah. So we're going to take a look at one of my favorite Torah portions. It is a comedy, if nothing else. We are going to delve a little bit into the world of Balaam and his donkey. But I want us to think about this section of Torah in a specific way. I want us to think about what it means to be a prophet, because part of the job of a prophet is to speak the words of Torah and of God and to bring those out into the world and to see truth and to bring it out into the world. So Balaam is an interesting character. We have actually this beautiful artistic rendering of the story itself, which we'll get to in a second. But I want us to think a little bit about that. So so the story of Balaam, Balak, and the donkey. It's a little bit much. So rather than give you the whole story, let me sum up. Balaam, we have the non-Israelite prophet. It's important that we remember he's not an Israelite prophet. That comes into play a little bit. And the Balak, who is the Moabite king, hires Balaam to curse the Israelites. Balaam, though, asks God what to do. Balaam is not an Israelite prophet, yet he's asking God what to do, knowing that, like, there may be some boundaries maybe he shouldn't cross. And initially, God is very clear, like, this is not really what you should be doing, and I'm the one who sort of decides these things and whatnot. But eventually, God sort of says, well, if you really have to go, go, right? Which, those of us who have been parents or in relationships know that if that's what the person says, probably they don't mean it. And actually, as it turns out, when Balaam does go, God's pretty angry. And so on the road to the Israelite encampment, God sends an angel with a flaming sword who stands before Balaam and the donkey. Balaam doesn't see the angel. The donkey, however, does and stops. And Balaam then beats his donkey for stopping. The donkey then begins to talk and says, well, what are you beating me for? Like, there's an angel with a flaming sword standing in my way. And at that moment, when the donkey talks, then Balaam finally sees what's standing right in front of him, which is this angel of God. And, of course, Balaam, is like, oh, there was an angel. All right, cool. And sends everybody off on their way. Balaam then gets to the Israelites' encampment and stands upon the mountain. And what words come out of Balaam's mouth? Not a curse. Instead, Balaam blesses them. And what does Balaam use to bless them? Something that we say every Shabbat morning. In fact, this past Shabbat morning, Cantor Singer was just telling everybody again how these are words of blessing that come from not even our own people, but are in our Torah, the Matovu prayer, right? So this is what we hear, is these words of blessings that come from Balaam. So you can see how this is sort of like a bizarre story right here in the middle of Numbers, and what's it doing here? And we've got a talking donkey and like some angel with a flamethrower. Like, what is happening? Okay. So here we have Balaam, right? There he is blessing the people on their encampment. He meant to curse them. Turns out, not so much, because God makes the blessing comes out. But what makes Balaam a prophet? That is important for us to consider. What makes Balaam a prophet? Or doesn't make Balaam a prophet? So Balaam brings about God's anger by going off with Balak's men. And it's important for us to understand why that happened. So Rashi actually points out that, that the issue isn't that he went, right? It's that he went even though he knew that it was not really something God wanted him to do, right? That Balaam sees the evil in this matter, as Rashi puts it, the evil in the eyes of the omnipresent. He understands that God doesn't really want him to go, and yet he wants to go anyway. He wants to do this mission. Now, why? Is it for the gold? Is it for other things? The rabbis kind of don't love Balaam, and there's lots of sort of, Balaam gets a bad reputation, if you will. And the other thing that's interesting here is Balaam, throughout the course of the story, recognizes that he only has limited power over his actions as a prophet, right? And his ability to be a seer and bless and curse. He knows that he has to follow God's actions. But if he is a messenger of God, and if he is a prophet, or no, you're not a messenger of God, but if he's a prophet who is going to be able to say whatever God wants him to say, then why can he not see this angel standing right before him? Which leads us back to the donkey, the character who does see the angel. So in multiple places in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, in Bereshit Rabbah, we are told that Balaam's donkey, this donkey in this story, who is never named, is one of the 10 things created on the eve of for Shabbat, right? The last little bit of creation magic, if you will, that God had before the end of the week, before God sort of takes a rest and creation is somewhat finished, if you will. Balaam's donkey is one of the things that is created, along with, by the way, if you're wondering what else is on that list, manna is created, right? All these things we're going to need later. They come up early so that, you know, you can get those tools later. It's like a good writer always puts in the things you're going to need later. You don't know it. It's like Harry Potter. You need the invisibility cloak, even though you got it in the first book, right? Yeah, she says. All right. And we have Moses' staff, which was also created there. And then the tablets themselves. So, you know, Balaam's donkey is essentially created with the tablets. Like, book could be more Shavuot than studying about Balaam's donkey. But the donkey's unnamed, but yet it's personified, and it even speaks. Some might say it's the inspiration for another donkey. I don't know. You can decide for yourselves. But whenever now I think of Balaam's donkey, I think of Eddie Murphy. So all of this to say, who is the real prophet, right? Who is the real prophet here? In order to understand who the real prophet is in this story, we also have to actually pause for a second and think about what is the role of the prophet. So Abraham Joshua Heschel talks a little bit about the prophets. Actually, he writes a whole book about it. It's called The Prophets. And Heschel is really consumed with this idea of their leadership and their job description. Heschel's very clear about what their role is, what they need to do, what they shouldn't do, what they can do, what they can't do. He talks about prophets being sensitive to evil, that they understand that small things are important, not just the big things, that prophets can the prophets are, actually, I love this phrase that he uses, are one octave higher or one octave too high, right? They're just like, they're attuned a little bit more beyond, right? And maybe understand things beyond what is comfortable in our understanding. And prophets are, you know, often lonely and unhappy people, by the way, Heschel goes through, because, right, they're not liked amongst people. They bring truth that others don't want to hear. But I wanted to share two other quotes that Heschel really focuses on that are really kind of amazing. That this is the marvel of the prophet's work. In his words, the invisible God becomes audible. He does not prove or argue. The thought he has to convey is more than language can contain. Divine power bursts in the words, and the authority of the prophet is in the presence his words reveal. Meaning, the job and what gives the prophet any power and any sort of standing in the world is the fact that the prophet is going to reveal something larger than an individual, but something divine, right? Something from God. What's also important to keep in mind is the way that that too high octave works for the prophets. That prophets test people. They challenge people. They're witnesses for things people would like to forget. Prophets make sure that we always do what is just, even if it is difficult or uncomfortable. So you can see here a little bit of Balaam and a little bit of the donkey, actually, in this sense of prophecy, right? Balaam really does bring God's word. At the end, Balaam shares the blessing that God wants to share upon the Israelite in their encampments, right? But the donkey pushes Balaam to see what even Balaam does not see, right? That there is something standing in their way, that there is a messenger of God who is sort of giving them warning on this journey, that maybe this wasn't the right thing to do. So again, we wonder, who is the prophet here, right? Who is the one that really we should be thinking about? And so I bring this to you because I think that as we study Torah and as we bring in the gift of Torah from Shavuot, we really need to think about our role, right? Maybe we are lucky enough to hear the word of God and to understand that too high octave. Maybe we're lucky enough to seek justice. Maybe we're lucky enough to really be able to focus in and smash idols and share divine word in the world. That is the sort of the next level of Torah in my mind, right? That we must figure out how to share it out. And so, you know, And we also can't forget that prophets come to us, people who speak truth and people who speak God's word and the Torah's word can come to us in ways we didn't expect. That they aren't always the Bilams of the world. They can just as easily be those talking donkeys, maybe even an Eddie Murphy talking donkey. I don't know. Just saying, you never know. If Eddie Murphy's a prophet, I would not be surprised. But they can come in all different ways, and we have to really be careful, because the other pieces I think that is important about this story that's helpful for us thinking through the world is that Balaam is supposed to be the prophet, right? We know he's supposed to be the prophet. He's the protagonist of the story, and yet he is the one who doesn't see God's messenger standing right in front. Balaam is the one that gives the blessing, but Balaam does not see what is standing in front of him. So even those of us who carry forth Torah can often miss what's right in front of us. And so if we aren't careful, what will we miss? And if we don't listen to the prophets that come in interesting packaging, what else can we mix? So just a little bit of Torah to send you off and a little comedy to send you on your night.
Thank you. Beautiful. Huh. So much to think about. We will continue now with student cantor Joe Flaxman.
Hello, everyone. It is so nice to be with you on this Shavuot. And I'd like to begin with a little story. On Erev Shavuot, Rabbi Aaron Karliner entered the synagogue where many Jews were reciting the Tikkun Leil Shavuot. He interrupted them by calling out, "Give merchandise, give merchandise." In reply to the perplexed looks on the faces of the assemblage, he explained, Jews need to learn from businessmen. They employ salesmen who carry samples of their merchandise to show customers. When the salesmen accept orders, they know that these orders can be filled from the stocks in their employer's stores or warehouses. Needless to say, if a salesman displays samples for which there is no stock, he must be either a cheat or a fool. The same principle applies to the recital of Tikkun Leil Shavuot. On this night, when we celebrate the season of the giving of our Torah, we take samples from the vast warehouse of Jewish literature and study them, as we've been doing tonight. If, however, we do not possess a wider knowledge of Jewish lore, if we are not well-versed because we have neglected to study the Torah throughout the year, we are either cheats or fools. And so I say, give merchandise and not just samples. I read this story and I thought back on my year here at Stephen Wise, and I am very excited to come back in the fall. However, this will be the last holiday that I'm here for, and how much learning has happened during this hectic, crazy year on Zoom. And I just want to take a moment to thank the rabbis and Cantor Dan that I've been working with this year for the opportunities to learn and to teach, to be a student as well as a colleague. And I've got one other quick story that is special for Stephen Wise. It is told that the late Rabbi Stephen S. Wise attended a public dinner where he was seated next to a prominent woman. In an effort to impress the rabbi, the lady remarked that one of her ancestors was present at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Rabbi Wise quickly retorted, "My ancestors witnessed the giving of the Ten Commandments." And with that, I'd like to get into the idea of Lador Vador. When I think of us at Sinai, I think of what has happened in the Jewish people, that from generation to generation, this has been passed down Sinai. And so I'm going to share my screen for some text before we get to some music. The opening of Pirkei Avot. Moses received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets,
and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly. And so it has gone from generation to generation, ledor vador, a phrase that many of us associate with B'nai Mitzvah, when the Torah is handed down from one generation to the next. And here we are today with it. How many Shavuot have passed? How many in our lifetimes, our parents' lifetimes, our grandparents' lifetimes? How many times has this holiday truly meant something to the Jewish people? And here we are with it. And what does it mean to us? Let's see, do I know how to change slides after a year on Zoom? There we go. In the Talmud, we have a story. One day he was walking along the road when he saw a certain man planting a carob tree. Choni said to him, "This tree, after how many years will it bear fruit?" The man said to him, "It will not produce fruit until 70 years have passed." Choni said to him, "Is it obvious to you that you will live 70 years, that you expect to benefit from this tree?" He said to him, "That man himself found a world full of carob trees, just as my ancestors planted for me. I too am planting for my descendants." Our actions today are the seeds that we plant for future generations. However, it is not a given, as we see in Pirkei Avot 2:12. Since you cannot inherit the Torah, you must prepare yourself to study it. Now, we like to think that the Torah is our inheritance, and it is. However, does it mean anything if we do not dive into it? La'asok b'divrei, to absorb ourselves into it. Rashi explains, "Let no one say that since my parents and my grandparents were scholars, I need not exert myself to learn the Torah. The opposite is also true. Let no one say that since my parents were not scholars, which personally mine were not, I need not study either. That while it is there for us, it is also for us to pick up and truly engage with it." Lastly, on the screen, we have the text for Ledor Vador, part of the Kedusha, which is recited daily from generation to generation. ולנצח נצחים, קדושת הנהדיש, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, וקדוש וקדוש אתה. ידעי די 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 די, ידעי די 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 די, ידעי ידעי די די, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, בשבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, בשבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. Take a moment and look at your hands. These hands do not belong only to you. These are not just your hands. These are the hands of our parents and our grandparents. And these are the hands of our children and grandchildren. These hands hold onto the past. And these hands help us shape the future. We are not alone on this road we walk. We are carried by the generations that came before us. Just as we carry the generations that are to come, this is our hope. We are gifts and we are blessings. We are history in song. We are hope and we are healing. We are learning to be strong. We are words and we are stories. We are pictures of the past. We are carriers of wisdom, not the first and not the last. L'dor vador, nakid koleka. L'dor vador, we protect this chain from generation to generation. L'dor vador, our lips will praise your name. Looking back on the journey that we carry in our heart, from the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part. We are blessed and we are holy. We are children of your way. And the words that bring us meaning, we will have the strength to say, L'dor vador, nakid koleka. L'dor vador, we protect this chain from generation to generation. L'dor vador, our lips will praise your. L'dor vador, our lips will praise your. L'dor vador, our lips will praise your name. Chag Sameach. It is wonderful to receive the gift of Torah with all of you tonight.
Chag Sameach. Thank you, Joe. That was so beautiful.
Beautiful. Chag Sameach. So I think
So-
if I'm not, sorry, if
Yeah.
I'm
Yep,
not
yeah.
mistaken, this is bringing us. I'm going to bring us home now. Bring him home, but I'm not in too high of an octave, which was Rabbi Rena was talking about the too high an octave, right? Joe and I both like to sing in low key, so you're in good shape with us in terms of low octaves. And I just want to share. I didn't have a prepared story or anything to share. That was really beautiful, Joe. But I hope you don't mind if I share the story of the ancestry that we that we found. Is that cool? Okay, so I love doing genealogy, and that's one of the things that has inspired me this past year is looking into my own genealogy and discovering my own relatives. But when I meet friends, sometimes I'm able to look up their family members. So we found, what is it, a third great-grandfather or second or third great-grandfather?
So it's my great-grandfather, and we found a relative based off of my great-grandparents that I have giant portraits of. I don't have. My parents have these giant portraits of them. And, you know, they look just typical Ashkenaz Hasidic Jews being in the hallway staring down at me.
Yeah. So that's, and it's the last of, I think, of perhaps a rabbinical dynasty from Ukraine. So it was kind of it was just a cool connection that I found a relative of his through a genealogical website. So we're all connected. Really, we as Ashkenazi Jews, there's actually a bottleneck in our genealogy, so we're all really related. So, and I was reflecting back both on Rena's words and Shira's words too. Really struck me. When I looked at her Fields of Barley, thank you for that image again, the Fields of Barley. It reminded me of a song lyric, actually. Before I get into my music, it reminded me, there's a song. Do you know this song? You'll remember me when the west wind moves upon the fields of barley. You'll forget the sun in his jealous sky as we walk in fields of gold. And I was putting that together with, there's later on in the song that he says, I never made
promises lightly, and there have been some that I have broken, but I swear in the days still left we'll walk in fields of gold. We will walk in fields of gold. And I was thinking about the promises and the vows that are made, and it was kind of that just really inspired me. So thank you for your teaching and for the inspiration of the barley, the fields of barley, and for the generations, for all of that, for Lador Vador. So with that in mind, I'm going to transition back into what I started with, which I promised I would share 7 songs, at least 7. I went over, but 7 songs for the 7 weeks of Shavuot. I did Manishtana, that was the Passover one. Vizota Torah, which is a kid's song. There's another kid's song that I'll sing for you right now that's that you all can do. And this is one that Rabbi Sam and I wrote together, actually. I think we worked on this together when we were working with the Tots. And we came up with these song lyrics. We wanted to do a song that goes up, like Moses did, walking up the mountain, and a song that goes down. So we have up for the kids and down for the kids. And musically, we want that kind of word painting so that we can go up and we can go down. And we're teaching the kids high and low. Lamala, everybody go lamala. Lamata. Lamala. Lamata. That's up and down in Hebrew. So we teach them a little Hebrew, teach them a little music. Adults, kids, everybody learns together. It's lovely. Okay, so let's try. I'll take it slower. Moses went up, 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 up to the mountain to get a little closer to teach the words. Sorry, to hear the word of God. You got to hear with your ear. Moses went up, 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 up to the mountain to get a little closer to hear the word of God. Moses went up, 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 up to the mountain to get a little closer to hear the word of God. Repeat after me. Lamala means up, up, up. Lamala means down, down, down. Lamala, lamata. Lamala, lamata. Moses went up and Moses came down. And Moses came down, 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 down from the mountain to get a little closer to teach the word of God. And Moses went down, 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 up from the mountain to get a little closer to teach the word of God. Everybody now. Lamala means up, up, up. Lamata means down, down, down. Lamala, lamata. Lamala, lamata. Moses went up and Moses came down. Moses came up and Moses came down. Moses came up and Moses came down. Okay, that's it. That's Moses went up to the mountain. Moses came down to the mountain. And next, I wrote a Kaddish de Rabbanan. This also applies to what we're talking about, the Lador Vador, and this is about sanctification of our teachers and giving thanks to their teachers and the teachers before them. It's the same concept as Lador Vador, but specifically to teachers. And what I did with this is I basically took the Chatzi Kaddish, you know, Yikadav, Yikadav, Shmerapa, Yikadav, Yikadav, Shmerapa, Yalmani Prakrateh. Anyway, we took that melody and I used it for this. And little parts of the Kiddush as well. Vimeru, Amen, Al Yisrael, Ve'al Rabbanan. And by the way, before I continue, this is actually dedicated, I dedicated it to our rabbi, the rabbi, not emeritus, but the rabbi Martin Cohen. He has a special name. Rabbi Martin Cohen, I dedicated to him on a special occasion for him. And so this is for our teachers and for the teachers before them. And he taught many of us. Rabbi Martin Cohen taught so many of us at Stephen Wise. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidehu al ve'al kol Talmidehu ועל כל מדסקין ואורייתא, ועל כל תלמידי הון, ועל כל מדסקין ואורייתא. די בהטרדין ודי בכל אתר ואתר, ולכון של המרבה, הנה וכיסתה ברחמים, וחיין אריכי, ומזוני רביחי ופורקנה, מן קדם אבוהם, במשמיא והרה, ואמרו על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידי הון ועל כל תלמידי הון ועל כל מדסקין ואורייתא ועל כל תלמידי הון ועל כל מדסקין ואורייתא על ריבאל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידי הון ועל כל תלמידי הון ועל כל תלמידים ואורייתא, ועל כל תלמידי הון, ועל כל תלמידים ואורייתא. For our teachers and their students of their students, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. Let us say amen. Let us say amen. Romania. Okay, so thank you all. I know you're all singing along, and Joe, I think you're actually following along with the music. I can tell. He's got the book. More self promotion. This is great. So we touched before a little bit on the taste of Torah, you know. These ta'amei hamikra are the tastes of the reading. So you can imagine the taste of the barley, the taste of the milk that we celebrate on this festive holiday, and I'm looking forward to my cheese when I get done with this upstairs. I have some food waiting for me, so I'm really hungry. I'm famished, and I can't wait for the food. So, but I'm going to give you a little taste of the melody for the Megillah that we read. There's another Megillah, believe it or not. There's not just Megillat Esther. There's other Megillot, right? Yeah, 5. There's 5 scrolls that we read, and the festivals are all tied together through these melodies, and the melody that we have for the Megillat Ruth is the same melodies that you hear in Shir HaShirim, which is on Passover. So it's a common melody. Shir HaShirim Asher Shlomo. And I wrote actually a melody for that, and it applies not only for Shir HaShirim but also Bruchim Habayim, which is done for a wedding. And this is what Rabbi Shir was talking about, it being a sacred wedding. Okay, that these apply together. Oh my gosh! And my piano turned off. Okay, the piano turned off. I'm trying to get it back on. It's going to come back on. I have faith. Yep, and it's coming back on. Okay, we're good. So the Shir HaShirim is a beautiful text, and I set this to the trope, and I'm going to get into the next song that we have right after this. So let me go here, get the right sound I want. Okay, we're good. Okay. Sorry, I'm having a power issue. Okay. No, got that's an issue. I don't know why these are tied together. Sorry, technical problems. I'm coming back here. There we go. This should be normal now. Okay. So, it goes like this. Whoa, that was very loud.
that gives you the idea, just a taste of it. That's the Shir HaShirim and Bruchim Habayim. I tie them together just like Shira did textually. I did so musically between the Shir HaShirim Nusach and the text and the Bruchim Habayim. So I just happened to have that. We didn't even coordinate it. It's kind of amazing, right? And then this is a part of the liturgy for Hallel, which I composed a Baruch Haba. It's Bruchim Habayim is taking from Baruch Haba, but this is Psalm 118, and ironically, we use Baruch Haba at the end of Psalm 118 is the finale, the grand finale for the Hallel service, which is a part of the festival. So. And sing along if you recognize this. Baruch haba Hashem Adonai, Berachnuchem miveit Adonai, Baruch haba, Baruch haba. Adonai. What's going on? Berachnuchem miveit Adonai. Baruch haba, Baruch haba, berachnuchem miveit Adonai. Baruch haba. And this also uses the lyric. This is not mine. This is from a classmate of mine in Cantorial Rabbinical School. He's another like Rabbi Sam. He's a ranter rabbi. He's a dual citizen of the rabbinical and cantorial worlds. Jeffrey Sachs is a dear friend of mine, and he wrote a really beautiful Hebrew from Megillat Ruth, verses 16 to 17, and I hope you enjoy it. And it's an interlinear translation, so you don't need the translation. I'll sing it to you. And he uses the Nusach, the Ta'ameh HaMikra from Megillat Ruth. Ki el asher telchi wherever you go, you know I follow. Va'asher tarini ali, wherever your journey takes you, I'll stay with you. Try that with me. Yel asher telchi elech, wherever you go, you know I'll follow. Uva asher tarini ali, wherever your journey takes you, I'll stay with you. Don't ask me not to leave you, to go back to my home. My past will always stay with me, but this new place is my own. Ameh Hami Velohai Elohai, go
אל אשר תלכי wherever you go, you know I'll follow. ובאשר תריני אני. Wherever your journey takes you, I'll stay with you. ובאשר תמותי אמות, ושם אקבר אלוהי, אלוהי. And when you choose your final resting place, that's where I too will be buried. Elohai, Elohai. Ki el asher telchi, wherever you go, you know I'll follow. Uva asher tarini ali. Wherever your journey takes you, I'll stay with you. Wherever your journey takes you, I'll stay with you.
Isn't that gorgeous? Isn't that not awesome? I love Jeffrey as a human, and I love him as a composer and a rabbi, teacher. This next song is Ruth and Naomi. This is by Jeff Klepper, another alumnus of Stephen Wise. He grew up here at Stephen Wise, bar mitzvahed by none other than the A.W. Binder. His bar mitzvah was with A.W. Binder, the composer, the other composer, who wrote entire like giant, large works, large-scale works, which we can't replicate here, of full choruses and oratorios related to all of the Megillot, and he did them in the Nusach. So this is Ruth and Naomi. This is the story of Ruth and Naomi, uprooted, abandoned, alone. Though the famine was over, their hope and their loved ones were gone. Ruth and Naomi were saying goodbye for what bound them together and died. Naomi said, Ruth, now go back to your home. But Ruth shook her head and replied, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, that's where I will go. And wherever you are, that's where I will be. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. This gets personal now. All of the choices we make, the lives that we lead, reflect just how far we have grown. Ruth made a choice, make when she cast out her lot with the people. She found a new home. Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, that's where I will go. And wherever you are, that's where I will be.
be my God. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. That's it, folks. That's the 7 songs I had hoped to share with all of you. I think I did 7, at least. I have another one I can close us off with. I think it's the end of our program. If I don't want to steal your thunder, Rabbi Sam, but I think this is the end of the whole program. This is the Ganze Megillah. This is the whole thing from beginning to end. Megillat Ruth has been read, so to speak. And I'll close up with a hallelujah that I wrote. Since we sing Hallel and Hallelujah, let's close on. And Cantor Joe is going to continue in the morning with some Hallel. I think you got some Hallel cooking up of your own. So this is a melody that I wrote. Actually, I kind of stole the melody from a Hasidic klezmer tune. Okay, this is what happens. Okay, it happens all the time, but especially with Hasidic music. I have a Hasidic stomach. I don't know what it is. Hallelujah, 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 b'kodsho, hallelujah, b'kiyauzo, hallelujah, b'gevurotav, hallelujah, geruvudlo, everybody, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 take a shofar, hallelujah, b'nedel techilol, hallelujah, b'tov u'makol, hallelujah, b'minim ne'ugar, hallelujah, Tzilei Shama, Hallelujah, Bertzil Tzilei Trua, Kol Hashama Te'aleluya, Kol Hashama Te'aleluya. Everybody now, Hallelujah, 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 Hallelujah.